Hi, Assalamualaikum. We are students from the Faculty of Administrative Science and Policy Studies. We'll be going to present about the Cold War under Constructivism theory for subject International Relations. There are 4 parts to this presentation.
First and foremost, what is constructivism? Constructivism is the theory that says learners construct knowledge rather than just passively take in information. As people experience the world and reflect upon those experiences, they build their own representation and incorporate new information into their pre-existing knowledge. Constructivism's arrival in international relations is often associated with the end of the Cold War, and even that the traditional theories such as realism and liberalism fail to account for. This failure can be linked to some of their core tenets, such as the conviction that states are self-interested actors who compete for power and the unequal power distribution among states which defines the balance of power between them. By having a dominant focus on the state, traditional theories have not opened much space to observe the agency of individuals. After all, it was the actions of ordinary people that ensured the end of the Cold War, not those of states or international organizations. Constructivism accounts for this issue by arguing that the social world is of our making by Arnold 1989. The actors, usually powerful ones like leaders and influential citizens, continually shape and sometimes reshape the very nature of international relations through their actions and interactions. The basics of constructivism. Constructivism sees the world and what we can know about the world as socially constructed. This view refers to the nature of reality and the nature of knowledge that are also called ontology and epistemology in research language. According to Alexander Wayne 1995 offers an excellent example that illustrates the social construction of reality when he explains that 500 British nuclear weapons are less threatening to the United States than 5 North Korean nuclear weapons. These identifications are not caused by the nuclear weapons, which is the material structure, but rather by the meaning given to the material structure, which is the ideational structure. It is important to understand that the social relationship between the United States and Britain and the United States and North Korea is perceived in a similar way by these states, as this shared understanding or intersubjectivity forms the basis of their interaction. The example also shows that nuclear weapons by themselves do not have any meaning unless we understand the social context. It further demonstrates that constructivists go beyond the material reality by including the effect of ideas and belief on world politics. This also entails that reality is always under construction, which opened the prospect of change. In other words, meanings are not fixed but can change over time depending on the ideas and beliefs that actors hold.
Starting from the end of World War II in 1945 until the early 1990s, the Cold War was one of the most significant events of the 20th century. As tension developed between the US and the Soviet Union, no direct confrontation occurred between the two superpowers. But how did two countries that used to fight on the same side end up as mortal enemies that prevail for years to come? Here are the reasons. First, tensions between the two nations at the end of World War II. The first significant cause of the Cold War was the increased tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. During that time, the partnership between the Soviet Union and the other Allied nations fell apart. The best evidence by the Allied wartime showed toward conferences in Yalta and Potsdam. The Yalta Conference occurred between 4th and 11th February in 1945 and was a wartime meeting of the Allied leaders, namely Franklin D. Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin. The meeting took place near Yalta, which is now a city in Crimea, Ukraine. The conference purpose was for the three Allied powers to discuss how to reorganize Europe once they defeated Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. The hope was that the three leaders could agree on how to divide Europe following the war. However, the Yalta Conference is now viewed as a major event in the Cold War because it highlighted the divide between Stalin and the other two leaders. Then, the event's purpose was repeated during the Potsdam Conference from July 17 to August 2 in 1945. Differences were Truman had just replaced Franklin D. Roosevelt as President of the United States following his death. The meeting took place in Potsdam, which was in the Allied controlled area of Germany. The purpose is to handle the defeat of Nazi Germany, which had occurred just recently while discussed on how the world would carry on after the war. The second factor is the emergence of nuclear weapons. At the outset of the Cold War, the United States was the only nation in the world to contain atomic weapons, such as those used against Japan in 1945. As such, the Soviet Union could not militarily challenge the United States and develop their atomic weapons. However, on August 20, 1949, the Soviet Union performed a test of their first atomic bomb, codenamed First Lighting. Because of the development of nuclear weapons, the two nations did not trust each other and caused tensions and anger between them. As a result, they each spent the first few decades of the Cold War developing large nuclear weapons arsenals. By the 1950s, each country had developed enough nuclear weapons to destroy the other. This idea was known as Mutual Assured Destruction (MAD), since any escalation to war could destroy both countries. Regardless, these nuclear arms race between the two nations showed the growing divide between the two nations. Third, the ideological conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union. During the Cold War, the United States was based upon capitalism and democracy, while the Soviet Union was based upon communism and dictatorship. Development of capitalism as an economic system sought to reject the idea of government control of the economy and instead put the focus on individuals. On the economic spectrum, capitalism is a right-wing ideology that is fundamentally based on private ownership, competition, free trade, self-reliance, self-interest, and the principles of supply and demand. This system differs from communism, wherein the government usually controls production and makes all important economic decisions. Democracy is a political system associated with the idea that power or authority in a society rests with the people. In general, the people exercise their authority through elections in which they choose others to represent their interests in a formal legislative structure. This system differs from dictatorships, wherein many of the government's decisions are often a single person and a single political party. Examples of famous dictators include Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany, Joseph Stalin in the Soviet Union, Benito Mussolini in Italy, Kim Jong-un in North Korea, and Fidel Castro in Cuba.
The event that can associate with the Constructivism theory is during at the end of Cold War. Mikhail Gorbachev is one of the figures that contribute toward bringing the end of the Cold War. According to Alexander Went's article, One of the reasons Cold War ended was because the new paradigm created a breakdown of identity commitment inside the Soviet Union that came about by a stand down of an aggressive posture. As we know, constructivism is about the state of mind constructing their own idea. Gorbachev's foreign policy, that being called New Thinking, can be one of the constructivism example. This is because Gorbachev thinks security can also be achieved through cooperation rather than try to build as many nuclear weapons as possible. As we know, nuclear weapon is one of most dangerous weapon for the war because nuclear weapon not only can bring huge negative effect to the other states but also to the Soviet Union itself. This is because the other states like United States can also fight back as they have their own nuclear weapon. Constructivist Alexander Wayne in his article Anarchy is what State Make of It, called New Thinking is one of the most important phenomena in recent world politics. Wayne goes on, using the constructivist worldview, say that certainly one of the reasons for the end of the Cold War. Wayne goes so far as to say that when Gorbachev changed his mind about the nature of the relationship with the United States, the Cold War ended. So, almost full credit goes for the victory of United States in the Cold War to the Soviet. Constructivists think that the social world is constructed by how we want it to be. For an example, like powerful ones like leader or influential citizen will continue shape and sometimes reshape the nature of international relations through their action and interaction. When Gorbachev become leader during that time, he introduced glasnost, that with the meaning of transparency. Before the policy, Soviet Union has banned, booked and arrested citizens for political disagreement. Glasnost policy successfully and all of this practice and encourage new freedom. This policy helped to reduce the Communist Party that hold the entire government of Soviet Union and allowing competitive multi-candidate to occur. This is mean that its people have freedom to choose their own leader. Next, characteristic of constructivists is use their knowledge as foundation and build new things. Gorbachev saw that Soviet Union economy had decreased day by day, because the past leadership they used huge expenses for weapon and army. So Gorbachev introduced perestroika or restructuring. This is an effort to move away from their structured economy and allowing more private business and semi-market access. This policy actually mirrored from Western. From the Western, as Gorbachev saw it made other countries successful.
So now I would like to explain about the theory of constructivism. The term constructivism was adopted by Nicholas in 1989 and introduced as people and societies construct or constitute each other. The main assumption of constructivists is that the fundamental structures of international politics are social, and these structures shapes actors, identities and interests. Therefore, the world is structured by both knowledge and material factors. According to constructivists, the main important relation is between agent and structures. Moreover, constructivists adopt a common concern when understanding and explaining
how international structure are defined by ideas and how identities and interests of the states and non-state players are influenced by the structure. And the theory from Alexander and Peter Kazastein has become far from the almost particular rationalist mainstream of international relation theory. The constructivist theory, mainly seen as the most significant challenge to rationalist dominance, argue that the theoretical framework focusing on the concept of state identity can provide an important alternative and option to rational choice theory. State identity is mainly about the non-material factors such as values, culture, norms, or ideas studied by the constructivist scholar. It provides very important causal links to support the basic arguments of constructivist theoretical framework. While realism and liberalism concentrate on material factors like power or cooperation, constructivist theory tends to focus on the influence of ideas rather than considering the state for granted and claiming that it totally aims to survive. Constructivists consider the identity and interests of state and extremely flexible output of a special historical process. Moreover, the constructivist focus is on the predominant discourse in society. This is because discourse shows and change interests and beliefs and set accepted values norms of behavior. Those constructivism is mainly interested in the main sources and roots of alterations, and this approach has broadly substituted by Marxism. So basically, what can I say is constructivism is different with realism and liberalism. This is because constructivism is what is in our mind, what is our idea. So what is our idea, or what is running in our mind, that is something different, totally different from realism and liberalism. So here's some addition from me. So which is here is one of the central issue to constructivism is identities and interests. For example, the identity of a small state implies a set of interests that are different from those implied by the identity of a large state. The small state is arguably more focused on its survival, whereas the large state is concerned with dominating global political, economic, and military affairs. It should be noted, though, that the actions of a state should be aligned with its identity. A state can thus not act contrary to its identity, because this will call into question the validity of the identity, including its preferences. So this issue might explain why Germany, despite being a great power with a leading global economy, did not become a military power in the second half of the 20th century. So, yeah, that's it.
So the next slide is about the suggestion or recommendation based on the Cold War event. So the first point is behaving and appropriate behavior. So this method is how both parties are able to show a good manners and appropriate behavior towards each other. So under the theory of constructivism, it is social norms, where this can be also known as a standard of appropriate from the both parties to achieving peace and avoid war. So, in a simpler way, when the both parties, such as United States and Soviet Unions, are behaving good, so it is more easy for them to come up with an agreement instead of continuously war. So the second point is to establish relationship with the other country. So this method is the most common things to achieve the peace and to end the war. So the parties involved, such as United States and Soviet Union, they need to try to create some sort of relationship, not just with the rival parties, but try to make an official relation with as many countries as they can. So this social relationship is represent the ideational structure that originated from the meaning given to the material structure. So the successful official relationship can turn the enmity to a much better friendship toward both parties. So the next point is to identify the identities and both parties involved interests. So this method also can end the war and bring the peace to the both parties involved. This is because every country has its own identities. So it is really crucial to do research on the parties' identities because it will also can discover the interests of both parties. So the interest that been discovered can be used to make an agreement that will be successful because both parties gain their interest on each other that makes them depends with each other.
As a conclusion, constructivism is often credited with simply stating the obvious that behaviors, experiences, and expectations form truth. That idea is, in reality, the inspiration for the name of this theory family. International relations are simply built by our thoughts and acts. Yet, yet when applied logically, this, this seemingly basic concept has important consequences for how we view the universe.
Assalamualaikum.